So as a bookend to the video I just did on the WHA and all the wonder that is the WHA, I wanted to talk about, well, Shaky Mike Walton, a nickname he got from his father Bobby, and Mike Walton, decent career. Probably would be better known if he'd stayed in the National Hockey League, maybe. Although, it's one of those in betweeners. It's one of those kinds of careers that if you'd been around to see it, you probably would have said more about it at the time. I'm trying to think of a modern day equivalent. Yeah, it's hard to say, but he ends up coming into the league in 65-66, and he'd already won Memorial Cup. He'd already shown he could be a winner. Got on with the Marlboros. He won a trophy as well, a championship with the Rochester Americans. So he knew how to win. 65-66 plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs. 6 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. I opted not to go with the Magnets on this board due to the fact that there's Minnesota, there's WHA in here. For WHA boards, I might as well just do it different. Do it different the whole way through. So his second season, 66-67, 31 games played, 7 goals, 10 assists, 17 points. In the playoffs, he makes his debut in the NHL with Toronto. 12 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. He is a member of the last Stanley Cup champion, Toronto Maple Leafs, 1967. There you go. And then 67-68, he actually ends up playing in the All-Star game that year. 73 games, 30 goals, 29 assists, 59 points. So he plays well. Now, Toronto, not as much, but he plays well. 30 goals, that would be an NHL high. 68-69, 66 games played, 22 goals, 21 assists, 43 points. 4 games played in the playoffs, no points. Toronto starts to struggle as soon as the league goes from 6 teams to 12. 69-70, plays 58 games, 21 goals, 34 assists, 55 points. His points per game are good at a time where scoring is pretty high in the league. But his points per game are still good. But then 70-71, some struggles, 23 games, 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points. So February 1st, he's part of a 3-way deal. First off, he's traded to Philadelphia with Bruce Gamble for 1971 first round, with a 1971 first round pick, in exchange for Bernie Parent, who would not play for Toronto. He wasn't going to play for Toronto. And a 1971 second round pick that became Rick Kehoe. So they did pretty well there. The 1971 first round pick didn't end up being anybody of major consequence, but Rick Kehoe is. Then he's flipped to Boston by Philadelphia in exchange for Danny Shock and Rick McLeish. So Rick McLeish, who goes on to be pretty good for Philadelphia, won back-to-back Stanley Cups. But what's interesting is, so he ends up going from Toronto to Philadelphia to Boston, plays in Boston, 22 games, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. In the playoffs, 5 games and 2 goals. 71-72, as Rick McLeish becomes more of a big deal for the Philadelphia Flyers, and of course Bernie Parent. Like, you think about what Boston could have been able to do, and it's hard not to say, gee, if you'd done this right. But anyways, 71-72, 76 games, 28 goals, 28 assists, 56 points. In the playoffs, Mike Walton plays 15 games for Boston, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points. He has his second Stanley Cup in 6 years. Got one in 67, he got one in 72. That's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Can't take that away from him either. So 72-73 is final year in Boston, 56 games played, 25 goals, 22 assists, 47 points. And in the playoffs, 5 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. So the Minnesota Fighting Saints, these guys right here, they come along. And, the contracts are pretty good. Mike Walton is, 25, 30 goal scorer, depending on how many games he plays in the NHL. So he gets a shot at playing in Minnesota. Why not? Why not take a chance with this brand new league? 73-74, 78 games played, 57 goals, 60 assists, 117 points. Not too shabby. 11 games in the playoffs, 10 goals, 8 assists, 18 points. He ends up winning the Bill Hunter Award, which is their leading scorer award in the WHA. So, great season. Definitely better than what he would have had in the NHL. No argument there. But it shows there's some good offense there. 74-75, not a bad season either. 75 games, 48 goals, 45 assists, 93 points. In the playoffs, 12 games, 10 goals, 7 assists, 17 points for Minnesota. Then in year 3, 75-76, 58 games played, 31 goals, 40 assists, 71 points. This ends up being interrupted. This ends up being interrupted because the team ceased operations 3 days after he leaves. So the WHA, and I've gone over this in the WHA videos thus far, it's having its problems, and so Mike Walton ends up leaving. He ends up being, all right, well, I'm out of here. And so he leaves in 75-76, and he ends up in Vancouver. He ends up in Vancouver because February 7th of 1974, right here, while he's playing for Minnesota, Boston trades his rights to the Vancouver Canucks with Bobby Schmotz in exchange for Chris Odlofsson and Fred O'Donnell. So Vancouver ends up being a pretty good trade for them eventually. 10 games played, 8 goals, 8 assists, 16 points. Vancouver was pretty good at that point, and they were using this logo, so that's why I'm using it. 2 games, no points in the playoffs. So the Vancouver Canucks in 76, not a bad team, and respectable, and adding Walton looked like a good, solid pickup. He only plays 40 games in 76-77, 7 goals, 24 assists, 31 points. So he misses half the season, right? Approximately. 77-78, points-wise, he has his best season ever in the National Hockey League. 65 games, 29 goals, 37 assists, 66 points. Now, if you're a WHA fan, you would look at this and say, see, we're not that bad. Yeah, he didn't score in the NHL the way that he did in the WHA, but he scored pretty well. More than a point a game here and here. Not a bad clip there. And he's first in the National Hockey League in 77-78 in shooting percentage at 25.2%. Which, of course, the stats guys will come out and say, well, see, it's not something you can sustain, and it's not a sustainable number. Shooting percentage is too high. Clearly, the NHL, at that point, the Vancouver Canucks, they're advanced stats guys. They look at that shooting percentage and say, yeah, that's too high. They traded him. After his best season in the NHL, arguably, points-wise it is, goals-wise, not as much, but he played 8 less games and got 1 less goal. He's traded to St. Louis June 12th of 1978 for a 4th-round pick. So Vancouver must know something. Well, St. Louis, he plays 22 games, 7 goals, 11 assists, and 18 points. They let him out of his contract. He ends up in Boston. December 5th, 1978, Boston signs him as a UFA. 14 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points. These totals are not bad. Boston lets him go. January 22nd, 1979, he ends up signing as an unrestricted free agent with Chicago. Plays 26 games to finish out the season, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points. And in the playoffs, 4 games played, 1 goal, no assists, 1 point. He'd end up being a real estate agent, and I'm thinking, well, he covered a lot of real estate as a player, so makes sense he'd be a real estate agent in Toronto after this. Ends up playing 588 games in the NHL, 201 goals, 247 assists, 448 points. In the WHA, 211 games played, 136 goals, 145 points, 145 assists, 281 points. In the playoffs, 47 games played in the NHL with 2 Stanley Cups, 14 goals, 10 assists, 24 points. He doesn't win an Avco Cup with Minnesota, 23 games played, 20 goals, 15 assists, 35 points. But he played in front of some big crowds in Minnesota, and I'm guessing that was some of the most fun hockey he played because he's the #1 scorer, and they had big crowds in St. Paul. Now, what's interesting, too, is he played in the 1974 Summit Series against the Soviet Union, USSR. 6 games played, he ends up with 1 assist. And he was kind of singled out as being the disappointing Canadian in the bunch. The one that it was kind of easy to look at his totals, and then you look at the rest of that Canadian team, which was formidable. It wasn't a bad Canadian team. But the Soviets back in 74, the Soviets really all the way through the 70s and 80s were really, really tough to beat. And so I kind of feel bad for him because it's pretty easy to play badly against the Soviets back then. But nice long career, decent, sort of fun, and it sort of reads like some of the WHA videos I've been doing, that it's a fun career. So, shaky Mike Walton. And again, you know, he only played 115 games as a Canuck, but we're all Canucks, and I know there are Canuck fans that look at that name and go, yeah, shaky Mike Walton. Sounds about right. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, this is one of those offshoots from the WHA videos. Kind of a fun thing. That because we're going through that part of history, it's fun to look at the players who played during that time and played in the WHA. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.